ZombieTech. Welcome to ZombieTech, a forum for engineers, scientists, and inventors to ponder on the technologies needed to survive the inevitable zombie apocalypse.
She's Eddie.
He's Whisker.
And who do we have this week?
This week we have Mike Brennan, who is involved in Random Hacks of Kindness. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
So, what is Random Hacks of Kindness?
Random Hacks of Kindness is a project that tries to get developers, like as in software developers, together with subject matter experts in areas such as human rights, humanitarian aid, disaster relief, all sorts of social impact issues, and get them together so they can work together on developing technology solutions to essentially make the world a better place. It primarily relies on hackathons that happen twice a year, a hackathon being a weekend-long event where it's kind of an accelerated event for this kind of development. But Random Hacks of Kindness is a year-round community. And those hackathons are flashpoints in that year-round community where after these hackathons, these projects are developed and sustained and brought to the real world, and impact is seen from these projects.
I see. Now, if the hackathons themselves are like points in the year, how do you guys keep it sustained? Is there like a forum that you guys work off of, or do people just keep meeting throughout the year?
That is a good question. The community is focused around the website, rock.org. That's RHOK.org.
Okay.
But the sustainability throughout the year is more about the individual teams and the projects that they have. It's interesting that you actually asked this question because just today I wrote a blog post on rock.org announcing our sustainability project, which is a more focused approach to sustaining the projects and the hacks that come out of these hackathon events year round. And what this will mean from kind of a more coordinated global perspective is a few things. One is we're going to start with having sustainability partnerships. And these will be other organizations, generally NGOs or other, nonprofit organizations that can commit some time and resources to mentoring projects that have high potential for success coming out of these hackathons and trying to see them through towards continued development and real world impact. So that's kind of a major component of it. But there are some other components of that as well, such as a more rigid communication structure, the introduction of a full-time community manager for the Rock community whose job it is to essentially stay in touch with all the different teams on a year-round basis and communicate these successes back to the community. But it's not a year-round top-down effort for sustainability. It is the sustained effort of these different teams in these different locations year-round that we're trying to do our best to have institutions and systems in place to support throughout the year.
Right. Perfect. And I know is because we've talked to Geeks Without Bounds and Johnny Diggs of Voxeo Labs and Tropo, and I know that one of the things they had talked about, or the difficulties they had talked about, was keeping projects going. You know, they would come up with these great proof of concepts, so to speak, at the actual hackathons, but then afterwards, depending on whether or not the folks actually kept up with it or not, it would just end up either disappearing or kind of being put on the back burner for another time when someone would remember it. So I'm glad you guys are keeping track of it. So
yeah, and interestingly enough, Geeks Without Bounds is going to be the first sustainability partner that we're announcing.
Perfect.
And they're developing something called their humanitarian accelerator, and that's going to be one of the sustainability partnership programs that will help do exactly that.
Sure. And have you guys gotten quite a bit of interest from the organizations to actually continuing the sponsorship of these projects?
So Random Hacks of Kindness, in the grand scope of things, when you think about companies like Google and Microsoft and the World Bank, is not that massive of a project. So it exists in smaller areas of these larger organizations. That said, the organizations in general are really keen on impact and results, and they want to see more than just the hackathon events themselves. And I think they share that interest. So, while they're all involved in the strategy, we would like to think that the more that we can bring about sustainable efforts and track those efforts and actually see the impact coming through on a larger scale,
Mm-hmm.
the more those organizations will be becoming
Be
involved.
willing to, I guess, go through with it. Because I'm thinking, okay, so if you have an organization that comes to you and says, okay, we have this need, right? We think that we could use hackathons to, or random hacks of kindness and it's hackathons to further the development of this project. You guys come up with a proof of concept, something that kind of works, prototype, whatever. And then would this organization say, okay, we'll have one of our own engineers or our own engineer teams continue some of the work on this, but with help from your community?
It depends. There is no, and that's one of the challenges of this community, but also one of the exciting things about it is that there is no one size fits all for the model of how the success and the impact can happen.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, one way that it can happen is that we've had folks come to hackathons from organizations looking to develop a prototype, and with that prototype that is effective, they can convince their organization that it's worth their engineers' time to continue to develop it.
Sure.
We have other folks come to hackathons that they just don't have engineers. They don't have developers. So they come and solicit the volunteers in the rock community, and those volunteers become really invested in the project, and they continue to work on it together. Or sometimes there's a perceived need by people at the rock community in their own community, and they start developing something, and then when they really see some value in it, they start going to the organizations involved, say, hey, we built this thing, what do you think? Can you help us make it better?
Brilliant.
And there's so many different ways that can happen. And yeah, so what you described is definitely one of them.
Okay, gotcha. Now, how did you get involved in rock?
So I'm by way of a little bit of background, I'm a computer scientist. I'm in my fifth and final year of my PhD program in computer science.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And this might be a bit longer of an answer than you were hoping for, but when I started computer science grad school, it was a few years after I had finished my undergrad. I'd worked as a software developer. And when I got into it again, thinking I was going to go back and do more of the same, I'm going to be a software developer, I'm going to be a programmer, I realized very quickly, you know what? I want to do something more. I want to see my work impact the world in a more substantial way. I want to see it impact people's lives more directly. And there's a lot to do in computer science. There's a lot of interesting problems. But one thing that is not talked about much in the computer science world, at least in academia, is this idea of impact in the real world and what that might look like and how you might be changing people's lives. So I was holding on to that for a number of years, and I started working in the privacy and security community because I felt they really understood a lot more of that, and they do, and I really love that community. I found an advisor at school that I really like, and she's was one of the first advisors, one of the first professors I talked to that heard me say the things that I just told you and didn't give me a funny look and was actually excited about what I had to say.
Yeah.
And then I was still looking for that fit of like, well, what is it what is the right fit? What's that real world impact? And Random Hacks kind of popped up on my radar sometime around the second global event that they did. And it was right after the event happened. It looked like a really cool thing. And I said, you know what? I'd like to organize one of these in my adopted hometown of Philadelphia. So in the beginning of last year, I contacted the folks that run it. I said, hey, I'd like to organize an event in Philadelphia. They had me on the phone. They interviewed me. They want to make sure that the event leads are people that are committed and going to actually, bring something to fruition that's going to be good. And I did. I organized the event, my first rock event last June in Philadelphia, and then ended up being one of the most successful in the world. And by successful, I mean it had a lot of impact and a lot of interest, and it was very community focused. And I think that the Philadelphia tech community should get a lot of credit for that. So that happened. We did that in June. It was a really rewarding experience. I started talking with the team, the Random Hacks Kindness team, about my advice and ideas for making it, for improving it globally. I did another event in December here in Philadelphia, which was again very successful. I think even more so than the one prior. And after that, essentially they came to me with a job offer and said, "Hey, can you help us?
Wow.
Can you help us?
Good for you.
Thanks.
That's
Uh,
great.
yeah, can you join our team because we're really looking to improve and expand rock, and so that's how that started.
Fantastic. Now, you mentioned that you're pretty much organizing these rocks in Philadelphia. What actually goes into that?
You know, time wise, it's the largest amount of work goes into just event planning.
Okay.
You need to have the space and have the all the logistics in place.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the most interesting part of the process, I don't think. It is probably the most important one because you have to have the event, you
Mm-hmm.
know, unsuccessfully to have the hackathon work in the first place. But what I found to be the more compelling component of it is building the partnerships and the relationships in the local community so that you have an event that has a local focus
Mm-hmm.
and has valuable relationships built into it.
Mm-hmm.
Those relationships come in the form of having companies, say it's okay for their workers to come down and spend some volunteer hours at something like Rock. It comes from, partnering up with nonprofits in the community and having them come and judge Rock event projects.
Mm-hmm.
It comes from helping organizations come up with and refine problems that they can bring to the Rock event and have developers work on. So I
Sure.
think that's kind of like not necessarily the most time consuming part of it, though it is also time consuming, but I think we're the most valuable and interesting component of it. And I think what separates a very successful rock event from one that might not see as much impact is how much community you've been able to build around the event.
Sure, like how much some community support and such. Now, even with the name Random Hacks of Kindness, that's what first draw me to this organization because I'm like, wow, that's pretty big cojones to like actually say hacks because hacks get such a stigma, around it with, well, pretty much the entire media. Have you had any sort of backlash when going to these organizations and saying, hey, yeah, we got this thing called Random Hacks of Kindness. You guys want to come and be part of that? Is there anybody who says hacks? Question mark, question mark, question mark.
Yes, I mean, hack is a tough word to sell because it does have a lot of connotation to it from the media. It's less and less so, of course, as you go on, because more and more random acts of kindness and the term hackathon is becoming as entering popular culture. There was just a blog post up on the Huffington Post by I can't remember,
Mm-hmm.
but a senator's name talking about these kind of efforts, and the senator mentioned random hacks of kindness. So that when you have major elected public officials using the term hack, that goes a long way to help. And of
We're
course,
taking it back. I mean, it got stolen from us for a long time, and now we're taking it back. And they better get out of our way. It's our word. It comes out of MIT, and it's our community. It's our word. They need to learn to use the correct terminology, and that's not it.
correct. You're totally right. And I wasn't a part of the decision making process behind the idea of coming
Right.
random, but I'm really glad that they did it.
Yeah.
Try selling zombies every week to us.
Right.
You're like, hey, you want to come on my radio show? Sure. What's it about? Zombies. Well, I don't do anything with zombies. You don't think you do.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. It's like it's like when you tell, like if I tell someone I went to a punk show, they're like, if you say the word punk to someone,
Right.
Someone might have the image of someone with a giant blue mohawk, or someone have the image of someone like all black screaming their lungs out, or someone might have the image of a folk singer. And I think all of those are valid interpretations of the word punk, but it depends who you talk to.
Right.
And I think hack has the same issue.
Right.
But yeah, so there are, of course, organizations that, the company that I work for, which is Second Muse, which is one of the partners in the rock process, they do this kind of stuff with other companies as well. And, not all companies or government organizations can use the word hack. I mean,
Right.
it's just, but I think that's changing.
Cool. I dig it. Now you guys get a lot of ideas from, I guess, an online submission process, as well as community ideas from, like you said, folks coming in saying, "Hey, we have this need in the area." How do you end up choosing which ones everybody works on?
We don't.
Oh.
We give it to the community to choose.
Okay.
We think it's really important not to dictate to the community what they should be interested in and what they should be building. And not that you're implying this, of course.
No, yeah.
So what we do is do our best to help refine and vet problems and promote the ones that we think are really good.
Mm-hmm.
So when I organize a rock event, I'm going to get up there in front of everybody and talk about the ones that I'm most excited about. And I think that's important. I think that curation is important, but it's not a mandatory curation. So at the events that I've done on the Philadelphia level, we have the variety of projects from things that just came up that morning that someone wants to start working on to someone coming in and making a pitch for their organization about why you should work on that problem.
Okay.
But we don't want to dictate too much what is
right.
I guess
what would be good for that community, because they know the best.
Exactly.
So perfect. You would be a very good PR person, just letting you know. It's like, yes. So are you guys going to tell us what to... No, we're going to let you guys decide what you want to do. That's very... I like that.
But the other problem with that, though, is you want to make sure it's not too unstructured, because then you don't have progress. So it's funny, both rock events I've done here in Philadelphia, at the end of it, I do this recap and I say, let's talk about the successes and the failures and what you want more of, what you want less of. And it comes to a point where I say, hey, okay, so do you guys want more structure or less structure? And it comes down to the room is split in half. Half the people, we want more structure. And the other half are like, no, we would rather have no structure at all. I think one of the values of rock is allowing for that spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
To come in and say, hey, this organization is here to feature this problem, and it's ready to go, and it's going to have this impact, and you're going to see this results from it, and you can work on it. And also, there's this group of people that's trying to figure out something they could do with the school bus routes in Philadelphia, and we don't even know what it's going to be. So it'll be one or the other, and I think we want to maintain all of that.
Sure. I mean, I think that's interesting. That really, as I'm learning and hearing more about Random Hacks of Kindness, it's more that it's providing a venue for local hackers, engineers, inventors, what have you, to come together and actually have that space to do stuff for the community, instead of just doing it on their own, without as many resources as they would if they had come together. So very cool.
The will is there and the desire is there.
Mm-hmm.
People, communities want to work on things that affect their communities, not just their local communities, but their global communities. And we see rock as, like you said, a venue through which to bring people together to do exactly that, to facilitate that.
Mm-hmm. Now, what have some of your favorite projects been from these hackathons, or even just that year-long sustained stuff?
So there's a lot of cool stuff. I want to talk more about the ones that came out of Philly, because I've been involved in the planning the ones in Philly, and I know more about how they came about than the ones I've learned about later from the other events.
Yep, that's
fine.
There are
a lot of ones, and I want to make a quick plug real quick. For every week, starting a couple weeks ago and continuing forward, we are posting a rock success story on the rock.org blog.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to say a problem, where it came from, how it got formed, and what the impact is we're seeing from it. The third one is going to be going up probably tomorrow.
Awesome.
And I've been writing those and kind of bringing them together from all around the world. So if you're curious about what kind of things will come out of rock events in general, and not just the Philly ones that I'll be talking about right now,
mm-hmm.
I highly recommend taking a look at it, because there's some pretty neat ones. The one that's going up actually tomorrow is one that came out of rock in Jakarta, Indonesia in December of 2010, that looks at helping disaster management agencies assess the risk that comes with flooding.
I mean, just based on what they've had to deal with.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So one that I always, when people ask me this question, the one I keep coming back to as like the first example came out of rock in June of 2011 in Philadelphia. And there's a project called Philly SNAP. Now, SNAP is the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. It's formerly known as the Food Stamp Program that's put out by the U.S. government.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in Philadelphia and you want to use your SNAP card, your food stamp, debit card, essentially,
mm-hmm.
To buy fresh food, healthy food, there's no real central location to find out where you can spend that. You know that your local corner store probably takes it, but your local corner store is expensive and doesn't have fresh, good food generally.
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia does have a wide range of farmers markets that accept these benefits, that accept your SNAP benefit.
Okay.
But find out what farmers markets accept them and when they happen and where they happen. You'd have to search the internet for all different sites, for each individual farmers market site, or you'd have to, make a bunch of phone calls to these different farmers markets. And of course, a lot of the folks that have SNAP are, sorry, my computer just slept on me a little bit. Okay. A lot of the folks that have SNAP are lower income families that don't even necessarily have internet access.
Right.
Internet penetration is much lower amongst them. So what this group did is they did two things. First, they went and collected and mined information from all of the farmers markets that happened in Philadelphia, scoured the web for all this information, put it together in this really simple database that they can access, and they put a SMS text message interface on top of that. So you can text the phone number and find out what the nearest farmers market is and what the times are that it's open that accepts your SNAP benefits.
That's great.
So you can choose to use your benefits in a way that's going to get you more food that's healthier or better bang for your buck. And so that was created. It's a pretty simple, from a technical perspective, it's not a very complex problem, right? They used to actually use Voxeo Labs SMSified platform. I think it's Voxeo Labs that platform. And they put together a database as a team of 4 folks, and they basically finished this thing in a weekend and presented it. And they got one of the awards for Rock Philadelphia. So that's really cool and all. But then the question is, well, do people actually use it, and what's actually happening with it? Well, they got in touch after, and this is part of the sustainability aspect of it. Afterwards, they were trying to reach out to different organizations in Philadelphia that might be able to get the word out about this thing, this Philly SNAP program. And one of the organizations that they reached out to, and I helped them do this, was the Philadelphia Food Trust, which is very much involved in this effort. Philadelphia Food Trust said, are you kidding me? You made this in a weekend? We've been talking about doing here. Again, it shows the value of something like Rock, is that to bring people together to kind of hack these things out that are very doable and very possible, and just organizations don't have the research, the resources or know-how to do.
Right.
So they contacted them, and now the Philadelphia Food Trust has pamphlets and booklets that they put at every farmer's market and many, many corner stores all around Philadelphia. And now there's a Philly Snap with the phone number sticker that's been put on every single one of those pamphlets
cool.
and around the city of Philadelphia. And if you go to phillysnap.com, I think is it .org or .com, you can check out a video of how it works, and it'll tell you the phone number and all that stuff.
That's
so
great.
It's a little hack that happened.
Yeah. Wonderful. Good job, guys.
Really cool example of how that can work.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that's again a small one, and there's much more substantial ones that go through. And if we have time, I can give you another example.
Yeah, we sure do.
Okay, so one that came out of the most recent Philadelphia one, actually won in December, or was one of the winning hacks in December, is this project called Shelter. And they say it's Shelter without the last E, SHELTR. This came about, actually, the idea for this project came out about at the pre-Rock event, like reception. In Philadelphia, we just get a bunch of beer and pizza, and for 2 hours the night before the Rock event starts, we get everyone together at a local collaborative workspace downtown, and we just talk about the event, and we try and get the gears going, get the relationships going, and talk about some ideas. So someone had an idea there. It's this great guy by the name of Bula. His wife had worked a lot with homeless populations in Philadelphia. And through that, he said, you know what? Similar to the Philly SNAP program, if you're working with the homeless person in Philadelphia and you want to direct them to a shelter, there's no way that you can just find out what the nearest shelter is that has an open bed. And that seems like such an obvious thing problem that can be with an obvious solution. So that's what started off with that idea of, hey, how can we find where open beds are in Philadelphia, morphed into the Shelter Project, which has a basis in Philadelphia, and they're going to be expanding into other cities, which actually does more than that. So, of course, through the process of developing this thing over the weekend, they realized, well, actually, it's not as simple as just finding the shelter with an open bed. The city of Philadelphia has this whole shelter intake system. You can't just go to a shelter. You have to go to one of these intake centers, and those intake centers will assign you to a shelter.
Now, so this would be a tool that the intake system would use.
Exactly. I mean, it was
Mm-hmm.
never intended to be necessarily a tool that not a tool that the homeless population is going to use, but someone working with the homeless population.
Right, right. Mm-hmm.
So now the intake center said, well, but this is great. We could maybe use something like this so we can coordinate amongst ourselves. Because if we can have a system that we can easily update through text message or the internet about what's available and what's not available, help us coordinate that.
Right.
On top of it, they recognize another big need in Philadelphia is food pantries and soup kitchens. And again, there's no location that you can find out, what's available when. I mean, and there's all these rules that come with these shelters, that they need to be able to manage the people that come through there properly, but saying, we serve dinner to families at 5 o'clock, dinner to
Mm-hmm.
single men at 6 o'clock. Women can use our showers at 7, men can use our showers at 8, families can use it at 9, so on.
Right.
So they collected the information and also incorporated it into the system. So they are actually in the process now of getting some funding. And I believe actually they should have found out about that in the past, either last week or the coming week. So I could report back on that soon, hopefully.
Yeah.
And where this is actually going to be developed full time and implemented and brought into the shelter management system of Philadelphia, which is really exciting and a pretty large scope
Yeah.
and one that can be extended to other cities. And there's been a lot of interest actually from other cities. I think I want to say Baltimore or Chicago or a few others have gotten in touch with them. So they tapped into this like really visceral problem that people have this strong reaction to, and they've gotten a lot of attention for it. And I think it's exciting because again, it shows what these events and what random acts kindness in general can bring about, which is
Right.
focal point to bring solutions to these problems that people didn't even know you can come up with solutions to in such a straightforward way.
That's great. I mean, wow. Good job, guys.
Yeah, they did. They
That's
did great.
that's really a
Shelter.
very good, very solid way to help the community. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Now, when it comes to zombies, because we are ZombieTech, and so we do have to address the inevitable zombie apocalypse. Do you think that Random Hacks of Kindness has thought about preparation for the zombies?
So, well, in your idea of a zombie apocalypse, what's the IT infrastructure like?
Depends. Are you on our team? Because I mean, we got lots of cool toys.
So on our team, we are potentially using RF, ham radio style. But I would say that globally, I'm guessing that we won't have much of anything.
Because some zombie fell into the nuclear reactor. There goes that whole city, etc.
Can I suggest a way that random acts of kindness might fit into the zombie apocalypse? So maybe not immediately following a zombie apocalypse, but once the tide starts turning and reconstruction starts beginning.
Sure.
So, because I am a fan of zombie literature. I'm a big fan of speculative fiction, zombie, and I like the idea of.
Have you read our friend Mira Grant's books, Feed and Deadline?
I haven't read those yet. That keeps coming up on my recommended list on Amazon.
You will very much like it. We highly recommend it.
Yes, she's also been a guest on the show too, so camaraderie there.
Yep.
Cool. So my thought is if a zombie apocalypse were to happen and once the tide starts turning and things start coming back online, we're not going to be starting over from the Stone Age, right?
Right.
We're going to have technology that's going to be previously in existence that's going to be developed and brought back to bear on society. And the idea of random acts of kindness is that you bring people together to find out the needs in a community and bring people together to fill those needs in that community. And I think that can be an excellent focal point for bringing the world back online, so to speak. And I use online in the general sense, not in the figurative sense, not the literal sense, by coordinating efforts to get infrastructure and technology up and running from a community-focused point of view. So you're not saying, oh, well, we need to have this tower up in all these cities. We need to have this. No, every community is going to be different, and what they need are going to be different. And coordinating a global community, once you have the requisite IT infrastructure to start doing that, which maybe all you need is RF radios at first. I mean ham radios at first, to start up community-based tech reconstruction efforts. I think would be the perfect fit for random acts of kindness in that world.
Cool. Well, then
Presume
we shall look forward to what you guys can offer in the zombie apocalypse.
There is a zombie in Bill's tool shed. Now we need to get some people together and figure out what we're going to do about this. Anybody got a stick?
the thing is, the old problem, there are new problems or new twists on problems, right? It used to be, hey,
Exactly.
put up a cell tower in this city, and now it's we need to put up a cell tower in the city while zombies are walking around, and that changes, you know, the components of how you go about building the cell tower in that city.
Right. Right.
And now you need experts that are not just structural engineering experts and telecom experts, but you need experts in zombie crowd control and self-defense, right?
Right. Right. We have our work cut out for us, I have to say. So, I wanted to change gears a little bit to some of the projects that you've done and that you've worked on yourself, because I think they're horribly interesting. You spent, well, I don't know actually if you're still there or not, but you were working as a technologist for the Division of Privacy and Identity Protection at the FTC. Are you still there?
Technically, they are in the process of hiring a full-time technologist. The application of that just closed, and I'm going to be helping them bring on that full-time technologist. So
Awesome.
they're in a small capacity.
Awesome. Now, what did you do, I guess? As much as you can tell us anyway.
So the job there, so my role, my job title there is a technologist. Now it's a pretty broad title. But what the Division of Privacy and Identity Protection, which we call DPIP for short,
Hmm.
Rock and DPIP, what we call DPIP for short. What they do is essentially they're the only federal regulator when it comes to privacy in the U.S.
Huh.
Now, as you might imagine, with how much we all use the internet, privacy is a big deal.
Right.
So you have this floor full of lawyers, and when I say floor full of lawyers, we're talking 25, 30 people. It's not a massive division that are in charge of regulating privacy in the United States. And my role as a technologist is to be the bridge between that community of that legal community and the tech world.
Wow.
And
That's a lot on the shoulders of one man.
yeah, well, I follow in the footsteps of some really smart and talented folks. The two previous technologists who all brought me in as the third official technologist were Chris Sagoyan and Ashkan Soltani. So just give shout outs to those two. Chris and Ashkan both do a lot of work. If you Google either of their names, you're going to see a billion things on the internet of stuff that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
Chris started working as the first technologist at DPIP in the summer of 2009. Ashkan started working about 6 months later, and I came in about 6 months later than that in the summer of 2010.
Gotcha.
They both other things at about the same timeline that I have. We are all really excited and thrilled about the team that works at DPIP at the FTC and the work that they do. So they laid a lot of the groundwork and really carving out a role for the technologist. Because so prior to 2009, this is kind of crazy, right? But prior to 2009, there was no technologist in the Division of Privacy regulating privacy on the internet.
Wow.
For
That explains MySpace, but okay.
So and the DPIP existed for since 2002, 2003, something like that. So their roles come in, and now, of course, even while they're no technologists, they're really smart people. They're very intelligent, very smart people.
Right.
But the technologists can come to bear in doing a few things. One, suggesting new avenues of investigation, saying, hey, did you read this academic paper? It talks about this problem. It shows the issues here. Maybe we should look into this. Or, hey, I was poking around on, with this company. I've heard some things about it. We should check that out. The technologist helps them make sure their legal documentation is technically sound, which sounds a little boring, but it's actually really, really important because orders coming from the Federal Trade Commission last 20 years. The recent order that we've had with Google and with Facebook both require, or at least the order with Google requires 20 years of every other year privacy audits from an external source. And we've had other settlements come out that require companies to display notices next to their ads for 20 years.
Wow.
And working on a timeline like that, you need to make sure that the documentation is so technically sound that in 20 years, they can't get through it through a tricky legal avenue by saying,
Right.
well, said we should do this when the mouse hovers over it, but we don't use mice anymore. We have touchpads everywhere. So
So just making sure they don't take any loophole they can use to
right.
circumvent privacy regulations, I guess.
Right. A large part of the job is just meeting with the staff and with opposing counsel on a regular basis, making sure that the staff is up to speed and knowledgeable on technical issues, and really serving as a BS detector for opposing counsel. So when you have
That's awesome.
it's pretty fun. Like sometimes you have opposing counsel in the room and they're saying, oh, you're saying we should do this. We can't do that. That's going to take 2 weeks of programmer time, blah, 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 blah. And then, you whisper over to the lawyers that next to you is leading the case. You say, that's like 4 lines of code. It'll take like an hour. And those things like that have happened.
Now, are you able to say who the worst offender is?
I can't make a statement like that.
I would say it's probably somebody like Zynga, because they're just like wholesale selling off people's information. So, yeah, those kinds of guys are probably in the radar.
So to give you a bit of insight into how the FTC works, and also why I can't comment in general on stuff like that, is that the FTC, by default, legally, all their investigations are closed to the public. And the reason for this is that investigating a company doesn't mean that company is guilty, right? And if we were to announce our investigations, we could do some serious damage.
Sure.
And we're not trying to be the bad guys. We're not trying to ruin industries or ruin businesses.
Sure.
Is public is when we settle with a company or close an investigation publicly. Sometimes we close an investigation quietly. Sometimes we close it publicly where we say, look, there's no breaking of the law here, but this is not a really good practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that is the thing with this particular topic. It's the definition of what is a violation of privacy is so ill-defined at this point. Because so much has changed in the last couple of decades that, even though they're doing something terrible, it's not necessarily illegal.
Right. That's true. And I'm not speaking to Zynga or any other company in that case, but in general, privacy. So the law that the line in the FTC Act, when the FTC was founded in the early 1900s, that we operate under is that it is illegal to have unfair or deceptive business practices pertaining to privacy. Now, unfair is a bit of a difficult term legally. It says to prove unfairness, you need to prove a element of harm or potential for harm. But deception is the important part. And all the recent privacy settlements that you've heard come out of the FTC, Facebook, Twitter, based on this deception claim, where they claim they're doing one thing and then they do something else. They say in their privacy policy that they won't repurpose your data from one service to another, and then they do. Or they say, we really care about your security and take means to protect it, and you find out that they've had negligent security practices. Those are the kinds of things that are considered deceptive that we can take legal action against.
So
hold on. Now, we can take a minute here to, instead of trying to regulate the world into not hurting stupid people, we could instead just try to educate the stupid people here for a minute. All right, everybody, all of you, if you are not paying for a service, you are not the customer, you are the product.
That's a good quote. I like that quote.
So keep that in mind, everyone.
Yeah, it's interesting because the question of when privacy problems come up, there's this debate, right? Is this a matter of education or lack thereof, or is there something else going on behind the scenes? My feeling is that it's a little bit of both. And the analogy I use a lot when I'm describing the importance of privacy law and regulation to people is the analogy of a car. Do you guys own cars?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you own your car. To drive a car around, you don't need to know how the engine works. You don't need to know how the exhaust system works. You do need to know that you have to get the oil changed every 3,000 to 6,000 miles. You do need to know that you need to put gas in it for it to go. You do need to know that when you hear that weird sound when you're braking, you should take it to the shop.
Right.
Right? I look at privacy very much in the same way. Someone should not have to understand how cookies work and what the differences are between first-party and third-party cookies. But they should know that they are being tracked on the web, and that they have information on their browser that if they want to not be tracked, they're going to have to change some settings about that. And that's just my personal opinion on that matter, is that there's a limit to which you should expect people to be educated.
Savvy and
exactly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Very interesting. Now, I mean, with things like when rumors start coming around, from media, like about Twitter giving away private information about the person to governments that request, or when you see the Google showing records of when governments have requested private information, is that something that you guys also have to take care of and be like, whoa, just because a government requests this doesn't mean that these companies actually have to acquiesce to their demands? Or is that like part of your department's jurisdiction?
No, the Federal Trade Commission does not have an official position on government surveillance. Okay. Their job is to regulate private industry and private industry when it comes to interactions with government. I certainly have my own thoughts on the matter, but the FTC does not step in there.
Can we hear your thoughts? I mean, and just to let anybody know, this is not the FTC stance. This is purely Mike Brennan's.
Hell, I wouldn't actually recommend Mike saying anything about any of this sort of thing. I mean, we live in such a climate of, just
fear.
Yeah, just absolutely just don't talk about this kind of crap in public, and don't talk about sensitive topics on the internet, period.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm hesitating, not because I'm nervous about sharing my opinion, but because I want to be able to come through in an articulate way in describing it. And that's hard because this is a big gray area. But in general, I mean,
it's so complicated too. You address any little tiny issue of it, and somebody will take it out of context and act like you were applying it to something else, and it's just a big annoying mess.
No, it's true. I'll just say, I guess in simple, I support oversight. I think we have a lot of existing elements of our judicial system in place that provide oversight for people's privacy, and that those things should be adhered to. Another thing that I'll say, I support ECPA reform, which is the Electronics Communication Privacy Act. So the major privacy law on the books for the United States when it comes to your personal information electronically pertaining to how the government can access it is from 1986, I think. Right?
That's awesome.
Update to that law since 1986. So at that time, and that leads to some kind of really interesting and crazy things when it comes to how your information is allowed to be accessed by, how it's been interpreted by courts, and how the government's allowed to access it. For example, if you keep a personal journal, handwritten in your house, and the police want to see that journal, they need to get a search warrant for your house. If you keep a personal journal typed electronically on your laptop, stored on your laptop's hard drive, and you keep that laptop in your house, and the police want to see it, they need a warrant. If you keep your journal on a personal Blogspot account that only you can access and is locked down so only you can get into it, and you only type to it from your laptop in your house, police don't need a search warrant. They can subpoena that data. At least that's the way the courts have interpreted it. Now, I believe that the expectation of privacy in those situations, all three of them, is the same. Someone is saying, I want to access this data, by myself. I don't want anyone else to access it.
Right.
And I believe that a search warrant should apply there as well. But the way that ECPA has been interpreted is that, ECPA was written in 1986. And that time, like, the idea of keeping data on an external server is like, why would you do that? There's not enough space or resources to do that. You're going to be sending all this data back and forth. Like, the idea of the cloud was crazy at the time. But that's changed. The expectation of privacy has changed. So there is work going on in Congress to reform ECPA. I don't know what the current state of it is. I'd recommend getting someone like Chris Agorian or Ashkan on your show if you can. They can talk a lot more about it.
That sort of sentence just makes me nervous. Like, Congress is working to reform ECPA. I doubt Congress is working to reform it in the right direction. I mean, a lot that's in there right now. I mean, oh gosh. Can only imagine what they'd like to do with it. Okay, now that whole privacy thing, that was a mistake. We're going to rewrite this so that you don't have any.
Well, I mean, I just find, as you know, I mean, there are folks in Congress that are really smart and really savvy, and there are folks in Congress that have bad opinions. And by bad opinions, I'm not saying that they're. That's not a partisan statement. It's that we have members of our government that are not savvy when it comes. They weren't raised on technology, and they're
Mm-hmm.
not very savvy with when it comes to. I think that the recent news about SOPA and PIPA in the American media
Didn't
shows
help.
that because you
Yeah.
saw how many senators turned around when they faced with the opposition, and I genuinely believe that some people would be pessimistic and say, oh well, they're just responding to the PR. No, I genuinely believe that at least a number of them did not realize
The ramifications.
once they were educated that they said, well, obviously this is a bad idea.
Right.
I don't know. There's an interesting what do you call it? Paradox. If you talk to pretty much anybody, the majority of people will, to some extent, be supportive of their representative from their district. But also, the majority of people will disagree overall with most of what Congress does. And if you think about that for a minute, everybody thinks that their guy's okay, but as a group, it's all bad.
It's true.
And it's just an interesting thing to think about. So I don't know. I'm a bit more how do you say realistic about how things work over there, and business has a lot to do with it, and money has a lot to do with it. So whatever is going to make money for the people who are wanting to make the money, they're going to be. They have a vested interest in going out there and getting the legislation in place to allow them to make money more easily.
I think that is true for that is definitely true for people. I think it is also not as true for others. That's my personal opinion. And so yeah, I don't think that necessarily all the people that changed their stance on SOPA and PIPA did it for the quote unquote right reasons, but I think some of them did. And I think it does come down to a matter of education in many places. And this is something that just I've seen in general in my life as a technologist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm consistently working with individuals who are not up to as educated as others on technical things, and that's not a bad thing. That's okay. That's expected, and that's okay. But when they learn, they find that they can come up to speed pretty quickly and make really well-informed decisions based on their newfound knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also can apply to elected officials.
Sure.
So where do we put the line there for people who should be expected to understand how things work in the world, and who gets a pass for not having to actually understand anything?
I mean,
we could put the line at zombies. I mean, they're shambling around, they're trying to bite your hand. You don't really expect them to be able to figure out how to use their cell phone.
You don't want them to,
No.
because once they can, then we're screwed. Because then they can organize their own random hacks of kindness, but it's random hacks of cannibalism.
Random brain noms of kindness.
Or zombies. I've actually never heard that before.
So
where do we put that line? I
don't know. I think that people in positions of power should have more have more responsibility to make responsible decisions.
Exactly. I was thinking about it, oftentimes during election seasons, you'll hear one team will be like, we need change and reform and blah, blah, blah. And then the other team will be like, we need people who have business experience and have a proven track record in making profits go up. And you got these two different teams, and push that off to the side. The point that I'm making is that they tout their ability to make things happen in the real world, that they understand the way that the real world functions. And you hear this every single cycle, but then when you throw technology into the mix, it's like suddenly, oh, well, we don't really need to understand the technical details of how that thing works.
It's true. I think that what you described is a process that has been happening for a long time and is happening at an accelerated pace now. And that technology is outpacing. I mean, like I said before, the Division of Privacy and Identity Protection for the first 5 or 6 years did not have technologists on board. Mm-hmm. Now they're hiring a full-time I was a contractor, and so were Chris and Ashkan. Not technically contractors. We were special government employees. But now they hire their first chief technology chief technologist, who was Ed Felton from Princeton, last year. So they're awakening to this, and I think that this awakening happens with the introductions of new technologies, where there are the people that don't understand it. Because they don't understand it, they think they don't have to understand it, and it takes work and pressure from us being the members of the community of that new technology, to convince them of the worth and the importance of that technology that they rely on, but maybe they don't realize they're relying on.
Well, I, for one, am glad that there's guys like you getting involved and, putting a little translationary layer between the real world and their world. That's helpful.
And I think it's an important role to play in many components of the real world. And I'm not just talking about privacy and social impact. I mean, it's also an important role to play in business and,
and zombies.
And zombies, it's true.
Yeah, that's why we're bringing, zombie tech information to the masses.
Bradley Wojtek, you need to go down and volunteer your services to, well, he actually already hasn't he?
Yeah, he's in the zombie research squad.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
He's our zombie neurologist. Mm-hmm. Yep, he has purported MRI scans of zombie brains. Yep.
It's another one of those nerdy doctor kinds of guys.
It's good stuff.
All right, so every single episode we like to ask a small collection of little questions for each guest, because we really like to see the common thread from person to person, from very, very different walks of life, to see how they would do on this particular topic.
Now, I always have these pre-questions.
Interruptions.
Though I wish we could get you back on again, Mike, because you do so many interesting things, not just with the privacy bit at the FTC, but some of your own projects. I'm going to quickly touch on the fact that Mike also runs a DIY record label.
Oh yeah,
which is totally cool.
We do that too.
So yeah, we do, and so I wanted to see what you thought the role of a DIY record label would be in the zombie apocalypse.
That is a good question. The role of the DIY record label in the zombie apocalypse. I think DIY is the mantra of the zombie apocalypse.
Yep.
I think that music and culture is not something we're going to want to lose at any point, apocalypse or not. And I think that DIY music, DIY punk, folk, rock, whatever genre, is the constant. I mean, the commercialization of music is something that's a recent invention in our history, essentially, and making music more of a commodity. So I think it'll be the DIY communities that maintain that culture through a zombie apocalypse.
Cool. Okay, so now on to my actual. Well, no. Okay, wait. One more.
Oh boy.
Sorry. What's my social security number?
I'll tell you after the program.
Sweet. This is great. I want to see how savvy I am technologically in order to keep my social security number from being out there. Okay, so what are the 3 tools you would bring to a zombie apocalypse bunker?
Oh, that's. I can't ask. Like, I can't say, "Oh, am I going to have internet?" Right? Because if I am.
Oh, you can ask.
I can have internet.
Yeah.
Well,
we might have a loose.
World War Z. The internet was still up for like a couple of weeks.
I mean, we can still have internet.
Yeah,
we've been working on that for a while.
I think we could
coming up with data links over radio.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to bring a computer.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to bring. I don't own any weapons, and I don't plan to, so I don't know how. I don't want to go fight for a weapon, but I'll bring my. I'll bring my computer. I will bring my contact lenses. I really hate wearing glasses, and I got a big stash of contact lenses, enough for it to survive me through a zombie apocalypse.
That's awesome.
This is Philly, though, so basically people there just punch the zombies in the face.
Yeah, I don't think people will be that fazed by the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, just be like, oh.
And I will bring a really, really warm blanket. I know this sounds like a really poor choice. You got to think outside the box a little bit, right? I'm not going to be able to compete with the people that have AK-47s or whatever during the zombie apocalypse. I think I can find a pretty safe place to hole up. I think I can make sure I can see properly. I can not 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 die of hypothermia, and then hopefully restart the rock community on the internet uh,
Awesome.
as the world falls.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And your book that you would bring to a zombie apocalypse bunker.
Oh, Catch 22 is my favorite book of all time.
Okay.
And I think Catch 22 is a book. It's a book about being sane in a world that's crazy and being crazy in a world that's sane. And I think that's very applicable to a zombie apocalypse.
That does sound very applicable. Excellent. Excellent. Let's see. Okay, this is actually this might be a good question. This is I should have asked this before I asked my zombie tech questions, but
We'll let it slide.
okay, thank you. What role will privacy and ID protection have in the zombie apocalypse? If any.
Ooh.
Well, if zombies learn how to use technology like you're concerned about cell phones, then I think that's going to be dangerous because they can tap into advertisers' databases about websites you look at. They'll find the people that have the most, whatever medical things will make them tastiest, and then
Whoa! Now this is different. We haven't decided whether or not zombies would be discerning in their appetites. We've assumed we've done a blanket assumption that zombies will accept all human fodder. But now you are saying that they might actually decide that one tastes better than the other.
It's very possible.
It's like humans a la carte.
Right. I mean, if there are two humans sitting near a zombie and they look exactly alike, the zombie's going to pick one. There's got to be a reason why it picks one or the other.
I guess that's true.
I like Chinese food.
Hey, back off this. Huh. Okay, now assuming there is they actually don't specialize and they just like warmth. Maybe they don't want to deal with hypothermia. They're cold all the time. They take a quick drink of human and they're warm for like 5 seconds until they see another human. Right? Will there be any role of like when we're rebuilding society and all that? Like, do we just end up throwing our privacy away because we're all going to be carrying cards of who we are, insurance, and blah blah blah?
I know. I think that privacy will play a role in the zombie apocalypse. Maybe not against the zombies, but against other human adversaries. If you too much of your information is out there, especially if the website is still up and someone notices that on your Facebook page you have pictures of all the guns you keep in your basement, guess what? You're getting some knocks on your door.
Oh, that's a good point.
That book we mentioned earlier, Feed, by Mir Grant, talks a lot about what happens to personal privacy after the zombie apocalypse has calmed down a bit and the government has stepped back in and has sort of got a little bit of control of the situation again.
I'll have to read that book.
It's very good.
You will
you'll
very
much
it. Like it. Yeah.
Yep.
The
CDC becomes God, essentially. So
that's interesting.
Yep. And let's see. I think that's pretty much it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Are there any websites, both are for Rock and for yourself, that we should let everybody know about?
Yeah, I think if you have an interest in Rock, please go to rock.org. That's RHOK.org. And all of my information, the projects I work on, my publications from school, all that stuff is up on my website, which is mbrennan.net, mbrennan.net.
Beautiful. And we will make sure to link accordingly in our show description. So
thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for coming. You're like pretty cool.
Oh, thank you.
Pretty darn cool stuff, man. So.
All right, you guys can find this show every Thursday at ZombieTech.tv. Eddie and I are on Twitter at tymkrs. We do a lot of other things too. You can find information and links to everything over at tymkrs.com. You guys can come hang out in our chat room. IRC, old school, baby. Yeah. Anyway, I think that's it for today's show, and we'll see all of you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.